So let's talk about the U.S. Women's National Team, and I guess we can start with Carli Lloyd, who is very frustrated in their 0-0 performance in the last group stage game in Group E to see if they could get into, well, at least get first out of the group, because now going second puts them in a much harder path to win the three-peat. But Carli said this on TV. She said, I have never witnessed something like that before. You're lucky to not be going home right now. Amongst a lot of comments that she made. She was upset afterwards. And I actually want to get into this part of it because maybe we'll reverse engineer. So the women finished 0-0 for those that are unaware. It was in the middle of the night for a lot of you. And it was enough to squeak into the round of 16. Netherlands had done more than enough. They beat Vietnam 7-0. So it was going to have to be a monumental task to beat a pretty feisty Portugal team that we all knew that was going to be the one, Heath, that was going to be the most difficult. Mm-hmm. Vietnam was going to be a walkover. Netherlands obviously going to want revenge after us. We beat them in the final in 2019, and also when we beat them in the Olympics. We're also a different team from those two versions. And then you take on a Portugal team that's improving immensely, and I think it's another sign that the gap is closing. But there was some dancing and smiling by some of the older players. Initially, I think Carli started her criticism of the younger players not showing up on the biggest stage, and that's why they're here. And so I'm paraphrasing her. And then maybe I'm softening her statements. And then they showed footage while she was in the middle of her criticism of Megan Rapinoe and Crystal Dunn smiling and having fun and dancing, because I think they were just trying to celebrate that they got into the next round.
Yeah.
I want your thoughts on that, because I think it's getting blown out of proportion. I believe that Megan knew the camera and cameras were on her, and there was a choice by the older players that, hey, we didn't play well. Our younger players, we have 14 new players in this, Heath, that are playing in a World Cup for the first time. That's a lot, actually. Mm-hmm. And the vibes must not be good. And I think that Megan and Crystal Dunn and some of the other older players have taken it upon themselves to say, we got to change the vibes here. The vibes aren't good. And we have to get through this. It was a Megan talked after the game. It wasn't a great performance, but we got to continue to move forward. So I think there was a choice there to try to change the mood, and the older players are trying to do that. And maybe it wasn't the right time for Carli, but I get what they were trying to do. It felt like there was a method behind that madness. It wasn't just because they want to be Instagram stars or building their brands or any of that crap. I think it was more purposeful than that. What do you say?
Yeah, look, I think the performance was crap, right? First and foremost, I thought it was a bad performance. I think they haven't played well at all in this
whole tournament. Well, maybe the second half against the Dutch, I thought was all right.
Yeah, but like for the U.S., who are the gold standard of things, you expect a certain level of comfort in what they do. And I agree with her that they were a post away from going home. Having said that, when you go through those motions in something that big, I go back to the fact that I did the Galaxy Vancouver game the other day, and Vancouver got absolutely battered for most of the game. They got 2 half chances, scored them, and went through the next round, knocked the Galaxy out, right? And they celebrated like it was a massive moment, right? The way that the team, the bench, and everybody, and they played horribly, right? And it's like that I think the spoiled mentality to think that because they didn't play well, even though they advanced, they shouldn't have a right. Like the U.S. men's team should never have a right to celebrate when they go on to the next knockout rounds because of the way in which they qualified for the knockout rounds. I think that part is wrong. I think you celebrate those wins because with those high highs come the potential low lows, right? And if this team falls short, they will get their moment. They will get their cake. They will have to eat that, you know? So in a moment like this, like you said, you can take something and lift out of it. Maybe there was a little bit of arrogance woven into it as if like we had this all along. I don't know. I try not to read into that.
I actually don't think that at all. I believe that we have players that have been around enough to know when they play like shit and when they don't. And this felt purposeful to me, where we can go and wallow and have sad faces. And when you saw after the game that Kelly O'Hara get in the little team huddle and like getting after it.
Yeah.
And they spoke to her after the game, and she said, we have to just move forward. We accomplished the goal of getting into the knockout round. Yes, we didn't finish first. That would have been ideal. But we're finishing second. And when I'm here in Sydney, I'm doing work with Heather O'Reilly and Leslie Osborne and former women's national team players. And they say that this tournament is split into 2. There's the group stage, and then there's the knockout rounds.
Yeah.
And they had a slow start in 2015 as well. And then it started to click for them in the knockout rounds, and they took off. And
they still grinded in a lot of those games. You
I get that. I get that.
You talk about France. You talk about the England game. Like I do think the rest of the world is catching up. I do think that the style of play, technically from other parts of the world, is superior to the U.S. over the athleticism. I agree with that. You watch Portugal and some of their combination plays of like moving the ball 7-8 passes in, out the other side, just some of that patterns of play, really clean, right? Really crisp at times. I agree with some of that sort of stuff, but we are now in the knockout rounds, and it's a whole new tournament. And you can either like live in the depths of despair of the way in which you got there, or you can use that as a learning. Like you said, a slow start doesn't mean that they're out. They could, it just takes them able to click at one moment. You know, maybe it's the coach, maybe it's the players, whatever it is. It's not good enough so far, but they get a second chance now. And I think there is some reason to be excited about that. You can criticize. They played like crap. I don't disagree. Criticize the performance.
No, I get it.
Now in the knockout rounds with the new champ.
Yes. And obviously anytime there's a performance that looked that lackluster, and it was we've seen it pretty consistently, Heath. What's kind of worrying for me is the fact that we know that we're starting slow. And Lindsey Horan, co-captain, says, we are starting slow. We got to figure that out before this last game. And they still come out and start slow. Maybe they pressed a little bit for the first 4 or 5 minutes, but you and I have been on the field enough to know that if you run into an opponent and all of a sudden the press, I'm using air quotes for those that can't see us, the press that you have, and they play through it a couple times, you're not pressing anymore, dude. And I feel like Portugal demonstrated that they can hold the ball under pressure. And once they make a couple telling passes, you have to adapt to that. The problem is it feels like we have a plan A, and we've talked about this with the men's national team, and then we don't settle into a plan B quick enough.
Right.
And that falls on the coaching. And I don't think Vlatko should have had the job after the Olympics. You could see signs of this lack of cohesion or an understanding of how we're going to move or how we're going to adjust in that tournament. In that first game, just to remind everybody, we got absolutely slapped by Sweden 3-0 in that first game. It wasn't even close. There was only one team on the field, and they beat us. And then when you go through the tournament, very similar to this. It's just like we're not like flexing on them like we used to. We're not flexing on teams like we are the defending back-to-back champs of this competition, and we didn't look very good in the Olympics either. And I remember thinking after that tournament, after we lost to Canada in the semifinal, I know we won the bronze, but it just something was off, and I was surprised that we retained Vlatko. But okay, it's.
But there was, Jimmy, 2019 was the same thing. It was either for or against Jill Ellis, from what I understood of this team. Nobody wanted to play for Jill Ellis. They came together as a group, either for or against her, to win that World Cup, right? I think there's always going to be a question about the coaches. I fully agree with you. They've got a bunch of brand new players in this World Cup as well. And they're not playing well. I fully agree with all of that. But at a certain point, those players also have to be like players unable to solve problems in real time and understand. I think some of that's tactics, right? The way in which they set up, because they got smacked in the face a bunch of times where they just couldn't find a rhythm, right? And when they did, it was a simple first pass, second pass, and then the third pass was ball out of bounds, not sharp. Those types of things, like little details where it just looks sluggish. It looks a little tired. It looks a little bit, and now this is about the young players and the inexperience. 2019 was about we've got all this experience, and are we too old? Do we, is it time for the new guard? Is it whatever? And somehow they were able to find a way, like you said, in the knockout round. So they get knocked out early, it's a failure, right? This is the top team in the world, and they're going for back to back. You can't credit what's gotten them to this point, but no one in this tournament clearly respects them or owes them anything. And that's going to be hopefully a motivator for them in the knockout rounds. That's like, hey, no one's going to let us cruise. Do I think it's an issue when people complain about their dancing and excitement? No, I don't. Like, is it too far sometimes given the time and place? Maybe, but it doesn't matter. Judge them based on the field. Don't tell them you could dance only when you win the tournament. Like, every one of these teams except for one will lose this tournament, but you can still take in the moment. You can still enjoy. You can still be yourself as a personality. I know there's a thin line to that. I'm not trying to.
I get it. No, I get it.
I get the modern era, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have to say this part of the conversation, and for me, that's or if anyone is in a hot take mode, it's probably not fun to think about this side of it. But we have to give Vlatko. There's got to be a little bit of fairness here because he's missing some pretty significant players, Heath and his team. But I will come at him here after I say this because Serena Wiegman, the manager of England, is missing some significant players as well, and she's figuring it out, and they've adapted to her tactics, and they were excellent in their last game, and so they're kind of looking like favorites to me, or contenders for sure. But we're missing Becky Sauerbrunn, who would solve a lot of problems, because if Becky Sauerbrunn was in the team, right, she would be the captain, and that would push Julie Ertz into midfield. Thinking about an Ertz, Lindsey Horan, and Rose Lavelle midfield is pretty sick, right? And even though we asked for these changes in this third game, and we got Rose Lavelle to start after Vlatko started the same exact lineup for 2 consecutive games, we got Lynn Williams in the team. It didn't necessarily look more fluid like we all thought it would. So he kind of met us halfway there, and it still didn't look great. But I think that falls onto his tactics a little bit because the movements looked a little stale, a lot of standing around, felt very individual, and that's what I think the vibe is about the team overall. We're playing against teams that have a little bit more vibrancy when they're playing as a team. Maybe they know that because they don't have those out and out superstars like we've had and have. But so anyway, you got Becky Sauerbrunn. You're missing Kat Macario, who I know she hasn't played for a really long time, so probably never really in the mix, but world-class talent. You got Mallory Swanson. That would have changed the game. You have, I know I'm missing others. You got Sammy Mewis, Kristen Press. If she had gotten her knee stuff sorted out, obviously she's got experience and would have helped the depth in the team if you didn't start her. And you have all these pretty significant players that I think would have changed the complexion of the team. That said, I get it. Everybody has injury concerns. It's part of it, but it just feels like that needs to be taken into consideration. Also, Vlatko, I think, Heath, is working through a pretty significant transition in the women's national team where you're having these older players that have had so much success, and you're trying to bring in this new generation of players that are still trying to learn what it means to wear that shirt and everything that comes with it, including criticism from Carli Lloyd. So there's a couple things that are happening now, and we're just not playing well. And also, I just don't know if Vlatko's the guy. So you got kind of this perfect storm of all these different things, and now we're seeing performances that reflect that. That said, given the amount of talent we have on our team, you just want to see a little bit more and potentially see other players get a shot, because there are the Ashley Sanchez of the world, Sofia Huerta. I mean, they're probably chomping at the bit to get their chance and maybe prove that they're the right fit to make this team look a little bit better. But that's I don't know. I don't know where you want to jump in there.
No, my final thought on this, at least this particular topic, is I know that we started it with what's her name on Fox? That's
Carli Lloyd.
And I know for a fact she's not always been super well liked. I've worked with her, never had the best of experiences. Those are my small interactions. I know she wasn't well loved by teammates and things like that. But I do appreciate the criticism of this women's national team, because I think when I go back to 2019, there wasn't a lot, and they were teetering, right? They were on the brink of something bad. They ended up winning through. Great. But along the way, we kind of swept some of these weaknesses under the rug because we're like, these are the greatest ever. Who am I?
Right.
Somebody who, played some with the men's national team. Who am I to criticize the best ever, right? And the women's national team. So I do appreciate us opening up that door, or her opening up that door, or anybody who's criticizing now opening up that door to, hey, maybe this criticism should have started earlier. And I know there's been plenty, but like at a scale of that size, I can appreciate that conversation and that willingness to go out there and say things that I think people have probably wanted to say for some time, but results have always ended up going against, anybody's willingness to take the chance to criticize what's been a pretty bulletproof group over the last, 8, 9, 11 years.